Morning, everybody. Great to see you all here, and thanks for coming along on a very hot and Clipsal-affected Thursday morning. And welcome back to the Teaching and Learning Breakfast Series for 2019. I was just looking at the website yesterday, and I realised this is the 5th year we've been doing this, so thanks very much for your ongoing support, and hopefully we're going to bring you some more interesting and engaging speakers this year, and none more so than today. So before we get going, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to the elders both past and present. So as I say, today we have the double threat of Professor Abelardo Pardo and OnTask, two very interesting things to the university community as a whole. And Abelardo is going to talk about OnTask, and he will elucidate on that further. So over to you, Abelardo. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. This is one of my favorite places to speak, and I've spoken here a couple of times. And the reason why I love it is because it's the best place to test if your ideas are interesting or not. It's 8 in the morning, people have to wake up and really make an effort to come here. So to me, it's like a reality check, you know, like, yeah, I think this is interesting. Let's see what everybody else thinks. Let's put it at 8 o'clock in the morning. But I love it. This forum is actually great. Before I delve into the details, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the existence of C3L. C3L is the Center for Change and Complexity in Learning. It's a UniSA center, recently created. We are slowly growing up and creating impact and noise, and you'll hear about us quite a lot. I put there the mission because it took us a while to get to that, but I think it's a very profound type of objective. We are very keen to explore human-artificial cognition to understand knowledge processing, their impact on society. So we're struggling with this use of artificial intelligence. Is artificial intelligence going to take my job or not? This is basically what we're talking about. The reason why I'm so excited to be a member of that group is because we also put a lot of emphasis on practical impact. I'm a very applied type of person. I'm a computer scientist. I want to see things that make an impact and make a change out there. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, very quickly, 3 main topics. I was here in this seminar and I gave some other talks about OnTask. So I'm going to start from that point that we left it a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. I'm going to assume that OnTask is there. It's available to all of you in this institution. What else can we do with it? And more importantly, how do I make sense out of it and how do I use it? So we'll start with the premise that we know more or less that there is something out there that will help us tackle scaling feedback, which we all know and agree it's challenging, right? It's very different to teach 20 students in a room than 1,000 foundation mathematical course or something similar along those lines. The same way it is different to perform in a small cafe or give this huge show in a stadium like Lady Gaga or the Rolling Stones. But then I'll get a little bit into a bit more detail about the crucial steps that we've seen academics take through that really make a difference when you start tackling that problem. The first one is the sense-making process. We have discovered over the last couple of years a few elements that are very important, and I want to share them with you, always under the premise that you're going to map it to your own context, to put it in your own course, to put it in your own experience. And finally, I'm going to show you examples, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what kind of elements of that sense-making process you see in those actions. And these examples are actually real examples. And I made an effort not to choose my own examples because I wrote them. And I thought, now maybe let's take somebody else's and analyze them here. So you'll see at the end of the slides, we have 4 messages we're going to go through. And I'm going to ask you to tell me what you see in there that is valuable. All right, so let's focus on scaling the provision of feedback. By now, like I said, I'm assuming that, I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with the possibility, at least, to provide personalized messages to a large number of students. This is the purpose of OnTask. It's a very simple idea. Some people say, well, this is nothing more than a mail merge. It is a mail merge. The problem is that as soon as you set it into an educational context, a specific course, then a lot of other things come up, and mail merge is no longer a good analogy, but it's still okay. If for you it makes sense to call it a mail merge, so be it. I'm not that worried about it. The key issue here is that we are trying to connect the data that is available about what is happening with our students in a learning environment with some actions. And these actions, we leave them abstract. We'll get to more concrete elements in there. But the typical simplest example is If you have 1,000 students, would you like to talk to them and tell them, give them some suggestions? How can you do that if you have 1,000? OnTask tries to fill that gap. Let me give you first a couple of things that we have been doing over the last year or year and a half that are giving us a lot of encouragement about the way we're going through. After presenting OnTask to everyone, the first question that pops out is, what is the effect anyway? And we need to do that. And this is something we've been working on for about a year and a half, almost 2. And the way we did it is we basically sat down with the students and asked them, you have been receiving these emails. What do you think about them? 2 main results. I just present here one of them. The other one is in the making, but both of them will probably be published very soon. One is the type of reactions. You see them there in that scale. And those reactions we divided into these 4 quadrants. This is the main work done by Lisa Lim as part of her PhD. You see we have activating versus deactivating, positive versus negative. This is a very interesting graph. It is very difficult to try to convey to the students these type of tips or suggestions or without creating a bit of a negative feeling. But that's okay. If you think of it, how do you talk to students that are already under certain pressure to perform, the courses are short, things happen very quickly? How do you talk to them about things that they should adjust and create a sense of joy? It's probably not very realistic. But in any case, I thought it was very interesting to see these emotions. These are taken directly from the students' comments and try to work around that and give us a lot of context about the type of emotions that we can prompt. The other interesting result that I didn't show in there is that pretty much all the students were capable of verbalizing changes that they went through after receiving these messages, which is also a very powerful result. So we asked the students, so what did you do with that email? And I said, nothing. They said, well, yeah, made me think that maybe I should start reviewing, or after that, I started considering blah, or they verbalize some actions, which again, it's basically touching the evidence with the tip of your fingers. Focus groups, meaning 25 students out of a cohort of 600, but still, I think it's relevant. Now, let's go back then to the type of motivation behind this. And interestingly enough, it comes directly from psychology. After studying and after observing how students interact in these learning environments, academics, we tend to make the mistake. I'll be the first one to focus. Usually, number one thing is the topics. I want to cover these topics. And we tend to forget a very essential, for me, very essential piece of information, which is students are continuously making decisions on your learning experience. You are the one that is supervising that experience, but they are making decisions continuously. Should I go and watch the video? Should I review this? Should I submit the assignment? Should I wait? Should I talk to a colleague? They are continually in this decision-making process. And for us, it was a big turning point when we realized that that's the point where we think we can support our students the better. Not only that, psychology already tells us that if we want to support the decision-making process, we need to provide them with experience, which is a little bit difficult because typically courses are about new material, but that's all right. We can provide them a bit of experience, good information. We typically work around that very well. Prompt feedback, and that's where we focus. So basically, we have psychology telling us what you really, really want to do is support your students through the decision-making process, make sure you give them prompt feedback. That's our main motivation. There is a problem, though. We tend to focus on point number 2, good information. And every other academic I talk to, the conversation goes like, oh, I thought I would help my students by creating an infinite amount of things and make it available. Those are the 3 words that I begin to react, make it available. Well, let me tell you something. We are, 6.5 billion people in the planet. We're all making things available. That's what we do. Because we think that by making them available, that's it, right? But I'm not going to be the first one to tell you that making things available now is becoming a problem because there are so many things available out there, so many videos, so many PowerPoints, so many, everything. The problem is not access to information. The problem is to get the right information at the right time for me. So we have this issue we're all struggling with, which is overstimulation. I have a 14-year-old daughter that is interested in mathematics, and the other day she asked me, what other resources are out there to study math? How much time do you have, right? And then she came back to me, oh, I found so many MOOCs and stuff like that. Yeah, and this is the problem. So you have someone that has a little bit of interest. How do you channel that to the right information? It's not trivial. And this is what we tend to make as a mistake. Let's create more resources for the student. Let's make them available to them. Yeah, but at some point, the way I typically talk to academics about is like, suppose you have 15% of their attention. That's your budget, 15%. Every week they'll pay attention to your course 15% of the time. That's your budget. The more resources you put in there, the more you are diluting that budget. And at some point, you'll come back to me and say, they don't pay attention. Yeah, you see, you are over-programming. You need to be mindful of that. But one important part is that you need to give them the right information. And that information changes from person to person. And that's the catch. So how do we solve this? We need to try to not understand, but put it in the foreground of our mind, certain aspects that are crucial to guide the students in that decision making. We need to understand how human memory works and learning. And there's lots of work out there. We don't have to be the trailblazers on that. On the opposite side, we have to just gather the best bits and pieces from all over the place and then make sure we apply them to our own context. We need to be familiar with known useful techniques to study. I taught first-year engineering for a long, long time. I remember talking to the students, how do you study for this? Well, I get all my notes, I print all the things, and I start highlighting. Good. Highlighting has a risk, though, which is it becomes automatic. And I'll get into that in a second. Is that good or bad? The key point is not if it is good or bad. Are you, as a student, aware that highlighting has the danger of becoming trivial? And that's when they look at you and say, what are you talking about? So we have a problem. So we need to be mindful of these problems, put them at the forefront. I know it's a little bit removed from your topic of the course, but over the years, I realized that just focusing on the topics, you're trying to solve a problem, which is a student engagement or student attainment, but you're focusing on the 10%. You have to open the field and say, what is going on here? Yes, they are struggling learning the topic or not, but they are making decisions. Let's focus on that. This is one of my favorite slides I've been using. Some of you might say, again, what do you see here? You see a referee and a coach, right? These are two roles. And when I show this picture, everybody differentiates them. Yeah, the referee is there to make sure the rules are followed. The coach, on the other hand, is providing advice. Now, to me, I love this slide because this is basically, from my point of view, personal opinion, the source of my pains as an academic. Because without me realizing, I've been asked to perform these two roles in one single person. And these two roles are incredibly contradictory. And what is worse, this is what gets me really rattled. Students get totally confused about this. Who is talking to me? When you tell them about the exam, they look at you and say, who are you now? The judge of the exam or the coach preparing me for the exam? And over the years, what I've seen is that if we separate these two roles, we can manage them a little bit better. I know it's a little bit of a mental stress on the instructor, even more, but it's very powerful, the effect on the students. Another analogy. Think, pretty much every academic out there, the one-to-one conversation is the important one. It's just that you cannot do it for all your students. But when you have the chance to say, okay, let me see, what are you doing? What are you struggling with? What are your issues? What are your problems? Or not, or maybe it's a high-performing student. Wow, yeah, you're doing very well. That conversation is what has value. So let's see if we can distill that essence and try to see how much of that we can capture and scale. That's basically the point. All right, so let's talk about sense-making. Let's start scaring you a little bit, and then we'll go into something a bit more realistic. Most of you think, oh, we have a lot of data, and therefore it's going to be great. It's going to make sense in my learning design, in my course, and we're going to do some actions, which is what we said so far. And that's pretty much half of the story. I want you to focus on the other half. So this is what we call, this is one of them that is not working. Okay, that's fine. So this is what it is called pejoratively, and I tend to disagree a little bit, but that's okay, data exhaust, which is all these events that are captured by the platforms when students are clicking away. And it's called data exhaust, like it is toxic. I beg to differ, though. I understand there is a lot of information there. Those, by the way, are real data exhaust beats. But when you start unpacking them, and this is something that not necessarily has to be done by you instructors, somebody else will do that for you. They start grouping them. If the font was right and the size was right, you will see one in each of those boxes. So let's pretend. You gotta love Acrobat, Adobe Connect. But these events, once you start packing them, you start distilling information from them. So let's pick one. This one that looks very cryptic. In fact, what it's saying is something very simple. It says, a student play certain video at certain time. That's it. And you more or less understand where is that coming from, right? UniSA Online or any other video there. They click, there is an event that says, it's 2 p.m. on a Thursday. This student click on that video. Now, here comes the important part. When you throw in the last 2 bits of that, how about if we know that that video is about that topic, let's call it TOP as an abbreviation, and that video was made available in week 2. Now, this is when things get very interesting. Not only I know that the student clicked the video on that topic on week 2. You see? So this is giving me much more information. This is the key turning point number 1. Let's bring the information about the learning design. A lot of people tend to focus just on, oh, I have a lot of data. Yeah, but unless you bring the learning design information, that data is data exhaust. The lifting, the sense making is when you start bringing these things. Now, let me ask you, that box is in the wrong place. This is telling us that the learner played the video about topic top during week 2. So we know a little bit more information, not only play a video. We know now the video is about a certain topic, and it happened in week 2. Now, here's the question to you. What would you say to 3 students? The first learner played the top video first time during week 2, which is the week that you made it available. Second student played the top video for the first time during week 6. What would you tell that second student? What would you tell? It's a bit too late, right? Exactly. But you see, it's a completely different conversation than with the previous one. It gets even more interesting. What happens if this event is telling us that the learner played the video for the 5th time in week 6? What is going on here? Or they're reviewing. They're reviewing, exactly. So you see, this is the essence of sense making. So we start with data exhaust that says, click on the video. Yeah, okay, so far so good. But the interesting part comes here. When you say, no, this video is about this topic. It's there in week 2. It was proposed on certain activities in week 2. And I now have 3 students. One that did it the first day, the other one that waited a few weeks, the other one that has been doing it for quite a while in week 6. There is another interesting example. When you say play video, if you go a little bit deeper on that data exhaust, there are certain events that allow you to detect when the video is brought forward and backward, right? That is a very good indicator of someone that is struggling, okay? And informally, I've had international students come to me and say, the videos are great because I can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until I make sense of it or until I understand it. They're struggling with my accent anyway. So you see, unless we bring that contextual information, there is not much we can do. Do we agree on this? So again, if you go and say, oh, Moodle is collecting information for me, yeah, that's half of the problem. Or if you ask me, even less. Welcome to the beginning of the journey. Next step is for you to make sense of that data in your context. And we need you. We need the expert. We need to know someone that knows that that video was part of week 2. And we need someone that says, oh, this person is reviewing that video, and it's happening in week 6, because there is a midterm in week 7, the classic. That's okay. You see? Now, you would say, okay, this is already interesting, but this is just half of the story. The best part comes now. Once you realize the power of the contextual information to shape the data, to interpret the data, you turn the problem around. Gee, I wonder if I can increase the way my students engage with the videos, because I typically see them with the videos and they just click. They don't do much. And you're right. If you go back to the psychology studies, they tell you that and this is a fairly robust theory, that tell you that our brain activity can be divided into 2 categories, what they call the system 1 and system 2. System 1 is what you use to brush your teeth. Do you think about it? No. System 2 is if I ask you, how much is 35 times 17? Then you go like, oh, I don't know, let me think. Let me think is because you're pushing your brain to system 2. Now, this is very interesting for the students, because if you give them videos and videos and videos, there is a risk. The risk is that, yeah, they just watch the video the same way they watch Netflix. I saw the other day a very good meme. I wish there was a Netflix category of movies that I can still understand while I browse on my phone. And let me tell you, as soon as they study the market, they'll probably pop up that category. Don't worry about it. But what is underlying that comment? That comment means that sometimes you engage with a video in a way that is more on the system 1, automatic. The video finishes and we ask you, what happened in the video? Yeah, there was some equations in there, and you mentioned the word materials and resistance and some coefficients. But because you've been watching the video on system 1. So then you say, okay, I know the problem. The problem is that you need to engage more rationally. So the next thing you do is say, what can I do in my design to promote the engagement with the videos? You see? So we haven't talked about the data yet. What we're doing is focusing on the learning design and focusing on the underpinning psychological factors. And you say, yeah, wish. I wish my institution would provide me a tool to annotate videos, for example. And the reason why half of you are laughing is because that platform exists, and it's perfectly and tightly integrated with Learn Online. And why? Because someone identified at some point that videos are not enough. Annotating a video is basically a way of pushing you to use System 2. You watch the video, yeah, but at the end, we'll ask you 2, 3 questions. What are the 3 main points? Or we'll ask you directly something about the video. The coefficient that captures the resistance of steel, what is that? And you go like, oh yeah, they talked about that. Maybe I need to review it in System 2, using System 2. So this is the very interesting turning point. Gee, I wish there was that tool that allows me to annotate videos. It does. So you reshape your learning design. Now you create the annotation. Now something very, very profound has happened here. Because intuitively, what you would like to know is how many annotations the students are creating, right? It's not just go and annotate videos. That's, again, half of the problem. The full problem is, what do I do then? As a coach, I identified that it would be good for you to engage in a different way. Let's deploy that measure, but then let's have a chat about it. That's the true coaching. It's not just, here, do that. Here, annotate. What do we do about it? And this is the second essential point. We are turning this around. And this is the part where very few people venture. Now we have the learning design driving the data. That's the powerful thing. Now is when you say, yes, I need the annotation. And I need it because I need my students to be more engaged. Then you go back and say, and by the way, I need the data about annotations. So this is substantially different. We turn around the problem. And it's still sense-making because now you are driving the data rather than the data driving you. Rather than you working with, oh yeah, they click. What do I do with those clicks? Now it's the other way around. Now I decide based on my context and my sense of engagement or sense of student engagement that I like to promote, I make the decision that it would be good to include annotations. Now I want the data. I want the number of annotations, perhaps some natural language processing about the annotations. Are they substantial or not? Do they contain certain topics or not? Why? You are a coach. You are thinking like a coach. I deploy some measure. I need some information to start working with it. And this is the true sense-making process. And you have to get used to that bi-directional relationship. If you just think about what data do I have available, what can I do with it, that's half of the story. That's trying to solve the problem with one hand tied to your back. And then you keep thinking, and you get anxious, and you say, oh, this is great. So not only I realized that engaging with the videos in a bit more, in a very deep way with annotations was good, now you're on a roll, and you say, oh, there's a lot of literature in psychology and learning sciences that suggest you other activities to promote student engagement. And then you keep reading, you find something that says, oh, self-testing, rereading, and scheduling of study play an important role in real-world student achievement. And then you go like, oh, gee, I wonder if someone would allow me to create a list of tasks for the students to do, a to-do list, and a to-know page, so that the students can go back and think, oh, yeah, this is what I need to do. This is what I should know. Let me think about it. And then it turns out you do have that page. Every course of UniSA Online has precisely that element. Now, why is that there? You see the process now. It's because it promotes self-reflection. It promotes planning, goal setting. Those are things that the literature has proved. They contribute to student engagement and student attainment. So we play the same game. Now that you realize that this would be a good thing to have, and you offer it to the students, what is the next step? I want data. I want to see what is the progress on that to-do list, right? You see? But again, it's the design informing the data, not the other way around. We started from this point, reading the literature and thinking, a to-do list would be a good thing. Or, if you want a bit more of the puzzle, it's more like, what can we do to promote self-regulated learning? Elements of self-regulated learning. One of them is setting goals, goal setting. How do we implement that in Learn Online so that the students is intuitive, it doesn't overload them, cognitive load is reduced, instructors understanding? Let's create a to-do list and a to-know. And let's make it part of the modules. And that's exactly the direction this institution has taken, and it's there. But again, the interesting thing is, I like to have the data. Now, same game. What happens now if you get events that tells you that some learner read the to-do list, played the top video, created annotations, and ticked the to-do list in week 2? What would you tell that student? Nothing? You would talk to that student, would you? What would you tell? Nothing? You're doing good? Yeah, you see? This is awkward space, right? Because this person is doing pretty much everything okay. But this is also another very interesting revelation from our studies. We need to talk to all of them. This one, yeah, it's worth a chat as a coach, right? Let's get into the interesting ones. Second one, learn and play the top video, did not create any annotations, didn't read the to-do list in week 2. That's an easy one. All of us instructors jump and say, oh yeah, this is what I would tell that person. But you see, this is the difference. You would talk differently, person number 1, person number 2. And then things get very interesting, like what happens if the learner played the top video, read the to-do list for the first time, no annotations during week 6. Now we're beginning to get a much more nuanced view of the strategy. And we have a few more elements. So individual number C, we will say, you're late, in a sense. Go and do the annotations. This is important. Try to schedule something a bit more precise. Check the to-do list. Not with those words. We'll focus on the words in a little bit. But that's basically the type of information that you're gathering. And again, you can scale that. That type of information, properly written, can be then made available to the right students. So again, this is the big step forward. It's not enough to say, oh, we got data, oh, we got OnTask, let's send some emails. No, it's this game, it's this loop. Eventually, you'll probably be thinking, come on in, don't be shy. You'll probably be thinking, yeah, but all that data has to come to me. I wonder if the institution will do that. They actually do. When you connect to OnTask in Learn Online, there is some pre-population of that data. Now, you may come back and say, yeah, but this is not ideal. Of course, like everything else, right? But still, you do have that information there for you to start reasoning. The key point is that unless you understand the context, then we cannot do much with that. Just making the data available is not enough. We need the expert in the loop. We need you. We need you as a coach thinking, I have 3 or 4 strategies here that I see clearly. Let me see how I address all of them. So what I like to propose is something a little bit different, which is try to capture this in the simple rules. And this is at the core of OnTask. If I observe something, then I do something. It's what we call the if this, then that. Okay. This is what we're doing in OnTask. We are creating a condition, we're identifying certain conditions, then say, I'd like them to do something about it. Let's take one of the examples. If the learner played top video, did not create annotations, didn't read the to-do list in week 2, that's the condition. That's the this. If top video play week 2 is equal 0, and annotations in week 2 is equal 0, and read the to-do list in week 2 is equal 0, then we have identified the condition that seems to point to someone that hasn't engaged with anything. Then, what we do is, okay, let me write something to you. It would be good for you to check the video as it relates to a certain topic, and we need in order to tackle this other topic. Now, I left those parentheses there on purpose because this email is you talking to the students, highly contextualized. The broader you go in terms like, oh, you have to study more, or you have to work harder, the less value. You see a coach sitting in there and say, oh, you need to swim faster. What kind of coach is that, right? You need contextualized information, and that's the big difference. So this is the rule that we're looking for. So what I'm proposing is a little bit of a different approach. We're trying to achieve this. We're trying to achieve this specific information to reach the student, but it has to be driven from the learning design. And this is what takes a little bit to get used to, because we are too dazzled by the presence of data there. Oh, let me look at the data and see how can I use it. No, you are in command. You are the expert. You know the learning design. Go follow the right motivation, and then let's connect with the data. So what I'm proposing here is rather than having the data and then something sense-making, I propose this iterative process. And we've been piloting it for a while, and it's very powerful. It takes you to places that you never thought before. When you say, oh, this is interesting, yeah, the annotations in the video were interesting, but again, not only is annotations, we need them to be strategic, and then you start pulling the thread. Strategic means maybe setting goals. Setting goals means let's put something in there. We just pushed out a publication that we gave the students a two-dimensional space, and we asked them, how difficult was this question for you? Very difficult, very easy. And how much did it contribute to your acquiring certain skills? It's a 2D space, and they click in that space, and they go to one of the quadrants. We're basically asking them to reflect. And that 2D space is immediately below the video. So it's not like, get out of the video, get to the email, get the reminder, click in there, log in, go to assessment, week 3, multiple choice question. 7 clicks later, yeah, you find out what was it that you were asking me. Now, so you have to be very careful how you deploy these things. because you have a certain amount of information. Again, put yourself in the shoes of your students. They are making decisions. Bring that to the place that makes sense, and then let the data help you make decisions. All right, finally, actions. And this is where you come in. What kind of actions do we have in mind? Let me give you a very precise example that is not mine. It's a biology course, and we have one single indicator. This is basically to get you very quickly in the space of thinking what kind of things are worth mentioning or talking about. We have one single indicator, which is the level of persistency. I put this in on purpose because you might be thinking, wait a minute, what is the level of persistency? This is an interesting point because sometimes things get very complex here and we start to break the rules and say, you know what, don't worry about it. We'll have a team of experts deciding what is the level of persistency. You are in charge of what happens next, the important part, which is what do you do with 4 levels of persistency. Now you may say, hang on, I don't trust these people. I want to review the way they calculate persistency. Fine, in your spare time do that. But we can probably have a very specialized team of psychologists, behavioral psychologists, anyone that could say, yeah, the way to measure persistency is this way. You can definitely talk to them and say, I have these elements in my design. Can I then get information about persistency? You can actually have the conversation, what kind of elements do you have in mind for me to include in the design to promote the presence of persistency? That's a different conversation. Now let's suppose the data comes to you and you have 4 levels of persistency. Very low persistency, students with very low persistency, medium persistency, very high persistency. Biology course. So this that I'm showing you right now is the candidate text that the instructor sent to those students with very low persistence. I want you to look at it, I want you to read it, and then I want you to tell me, not me, the rest of the audience, elements of that email that you think capture what we're talking about. Anything. Who wants to speak first? One element on that text that you say, this is good because, and I'm willing to sustain the awkward silence as long as it takes. Go. Prompting interest, exactly. This is the coach saying, where do you see that? Okay, where do species come from? This is, again, very low persistency. Calling to action, calling to, have you thought about that? What are the elements? There are many more things in there. Yep, go ahead. Explicit concept, this is very important. This is extremely important. Very localized, very contextualized, right? We are talking about Charles Darwin's famous voyage in the HMS Beagle. So it's not like, study more. It's specifically, it's the coach talking to you and giving you much more precise information. What are the elements? Exactly. That's a very good point. We are inviting them to a conversation. And now, I know half of you are thinking, yeah, you're sending this to 600 people. How many of them respond? Not many. In our experiments, 5. And 3 of those is to tell you that they dropped the course and you haven't updated the listing. So no worries. We've been there, and we've been there in research, and we basically push the button and then go like, oh God, here it comes. Nope, 5 or 6 emails, no more. Yes, what are the elements?
I think in the first line, headway, actually giving the students insight that there might be an opportunity they can improve or
exactly.
Start getting on
headway,
with it.
positive, right? Things that I like that are not there is starting the email as we. We noticed that. Of course you did. You are the coach. Come on. Don't put yourself at the driver's seat. We observed that. That's a bit creepy, right? Let's just get it out of the way. Let's just throw the elephant out of the room and say, yes, we know what you're doing. That's the whole point. I mean, I'm helping you. I'm your coach, right? So it is not enough. We don't need to start those emails. We have observed that. No, it's about you. You may want to try something.
The opening sentence suggests that the reader has made no headway. And that,
which is true.
Okay, if we're
this is the very low
confident that is true, then that's
very important.
Okay,
remember,
they might be making progress, but perhaps what we're looking at as indicators of that progress might not accurately reflect their progress. Maybe
exactly.
Maybe their friend downloaded and they read it. Maybe just because they haven't accessed the LMS doesn't mean that they haven't actually done some work.
And this is a very good point. It gets messy, right? You don't have absolute certainty that that student is not doing anything. And that's why you have to tread carefully and maintain this conversation in a way that if he or she comes back and says, "Oh, I got this under control," like, okay, then my measuring process is probably not working accurately. But that's fine. I still checked. I still had this conversation. Yes?
I quite like their comment, see if you can piece together some of the clues. So it's kind of inviting them to say, if you have difficulty, get back to me. It's not saying you must do this. It's saying if you see if you can, and implicit in that is if you can't, let me know.
Exactly, the coach, right? The coach's mentality kind of transpires here. There is no notion about scores, deadlines. Maybe the coach should talk to you about deadlines, but in a different tone, so to speak. Remember, this is for the very low persistency one. Yes?
That's the kind of work that I do, but I do know the literature says that some students don't get it if it's too subtle. There'd be many students who wouldn't read that first sentence as a warning.
Correct.
And even the one you might like to do something may not pick up that this is actually a clue. We've identified you might have an issue and it's in your best interest to engage. It will go.
I couldn't agree more. So no matter how many times we turn around and no matter how much technology we throw at it, we're still talking about human communication. We're not going to fix that in this tool or in this context. It's a way of exploring that. If you see that there is no engagement for the second time after this email, me as a coach, I will go a little bit less subtle on the second one, saying something a bit more blunt. All right, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, to add to Claire's comment and also your earlier comment on the low response, I use OnTask, and I've recently sort of changed the way that I word my OnTask emails to reduce those subtleties. So get rid of, please let me know if I can help you in this. I ask really explicit questions, and I start the email, the very first sentence in the email is a question, and my response to emails, to OnTask emails, has skyrocketed since I've had my first sentence of that email being a very direct question to the student.
So you see all these comments point to something that is obvious, but still we forget, which is about the context. You know your course, you know your audience, you've been working with them, you are the best one positioned to know, should I start with that sentence or not? Is it a first-year course or not? Because if it is a fourth-year course or a master's course, then maybe the agency has to be there. So how do we phrase this message is very, very important. Let me go through the other ones. So I highlighted here some of the elements that I liked. I like that you may want to try, if you can piece together. I like also that bottom question that was referred to, which is interesting. But let's now talk to the low persistency. What would you tell the low persistency? What other elements you identify here? Perhaps the difference with the previous one. Speak up.
Initial's good because it means you've just gotten started, but there's still some more work to do.
Initial good, exactly. You acknowledge, but, right? Is that yes, but. Okay, good. What else?
I also saw the specific instructions of where they need to go to help their understanding, so the Galapagos and the birds.
And you
comments.
Point to a specific activity, a specific module, things like that. Again, you can refine this message, say, maybe I need to know if they actually visited the birds and the moths. And if not, that's what I insert that sentence. And if not, I put something else. Hang in there. We need to make Stuart work a little bit. Yeah, there you are.
Sorry, Stuart, thanks. You're also, by explaining the fact that those two units, the Galapagos exploration and the birds and the moths, you're directing them to what they can pull out from that. It's about the understanding of evolution through natural selection. Often students, there's so much text and stuff, and they're not saying, what's the actual key point? So you're assisting them and directing them to what's the essence of those things that you're looking for, and then explaining why you need to pull those out.
And again, if you allow me to expand a little bit more, that point, that connection, it's probably, not 100% sure, it's probably more appropriate for this student with low persistency than the previous one. Very low persistency. Let's get to basics. Let's get you started on doing certain things. Perhaps you're not quite there to make those connections. Maybe next week, as soon as I see that your persistency increases. See, that's the type of things you can modulate. You, as a coordinator, are the expert. There was another comment in the back. That's fine. All right, so these are the elements that I highlighted. I like to take another look, because this is reviewing. Implicitly, the coach is telling you, review. Reviewing is good. The most important processes, you focus their attention. If you are struggling with persistency, let's focus. Medium persistency. What do you find in there that calls your attention compared to the last one? Let's do this one very quickly because I want to get to the fourth one. This is medium persistency. Now, we get students that are there, they are persistent, they are solving things, not the top ones, not the bottom ones, something in between.
Well, it's asking the student to dig deeper.
Exactly. Where do you see that?
With the question, would you be able to anticipate the influence of air pollution and how important are the relationships?
Still very situated in the context, right? And we are pulling a few more extra connections. Again, needless to say, I didn't write that email. Who wrote that email? The expert running the course. I just asked permission to use it because I thought, oh, wow, yeah, these are very interesting, especially the way this person managed to segregate the levels. What other elements you see here that call your attention? Yes?
Checking understanding and then directing them to where they need to go to get more information if they don't.
See? So those are the type of things. I'm guessing that 90%, 99% of the academics are able to do that. It's just that you usually do it in one-on-one after we understand what is happening with the student. This is a way of telling you maybe you can scale it in a way that you still get some of the benefits. It's not perfect. It's by no means a conversation replacement, but at least you're getting some headway. And if you're facing 1,000 students in some biology course, that could be a way. Yes?
The first sentence is important. It's often the one that people don't take notice of, and that's an encouragement.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Exactly. Positive.
But it's good. It's not great.
Yeah, you see, but then it's when you get into this game, which is fantastic. And this is when it's a lot of fun. And I also connect a lot with the comment that was made at the back of that first sentence is very important, right? Sets the tone. Then it's very funny because academics complain, yeah, but the students don't read the emails. Well, we don't read the emails either, right? I had some work done in my building the other day and I wasn't aware of. I wonder why. All right, the final one. This is my favorite one. How do you talk to the very high persistent, the one that is there and trying and doing stuff? What elements you see here? Again, you have to talk to all of them. But it's not that you have to. It's that if you are able to talk to all of them, you'll see the effect. It's very powerful. What elements you see here that call your attention? Let's keep Stuart moving.
The exclamation mark.
The exclamation mark. Which one? At the bottom? And the top. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Sort of work with the unit. Wow, I'm impressed. I like this one.
Yeah, I was also looking at sort of their reasonably challenging questions. I sort of saw it a little bit in the last one, would you be able to anticipate, but more so and I'd be looking at that going, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but probably I should be.
And that sits, by the way, completely outside of the course, right? British royal family in the sense, this is completely outside of the course. But we are talking about the very high persistency. So this is people that are already passionate, they're already there, they are willing to learn more. Any coach, any academic out there will be willing to say, oh yeah, I know what to tell you. Push you out of your comfort zone. Read some article, connect with this. Yes?
I also think it's asking how deeply they understand the concepts. Mm-hmm. So applying them into another context is really asking them to reflect on, to
transfer the skills to another context. Exactly, because here the coach is saying, oh wow, yeah. The reason why I like this a lot is because I remember a few years back talking to one of the high achievers in my class, this lady, really, really good, and talking to her about strategies and everything, right? And back then I was still stuck with those dashboards, but I show you the dashboard, right? And then remember she looked at me with this and said, I don't need the dashboard, I know what I'm doing, so it's not very useful for me. And that hit me, right? It's like, ooh, yeah, you're right. You are an overachiever, you are performing very well, you know what you're doing, you self-regulate, what do you need then? And you need that type of conversation. This person is taking the first course in biology. Maybe she didn't connect these two pieces. You did because you are an expert, right? You've been doing this for 10, 20 years. That's the key point. That's when you identify this content and say, have you thought about this connection? No. Yes?
For me, finding the right thing to say to the really high achiever is hard. And I know in some of our UO courses that people haven't been teaching these for years. So it can be quite a challenge to extend people.
Oh, I agree. If we are entirely sincere, okay, I wouldn't be surprised if we feel intimidated by these students, because all of a sudden you understand that they are gathering information that you didn't even consider. And I think it takes time to realize that that's fantastic. That's the best thing that can happen to you in a course. You know, some student that brings you ideas and connections that are, oh, wow, yeah, they're part of the discipline. Didn't think of that. That's fine. That's totally fine. It's about prompting them or motivating them.
How much of a risk is there of killing the golden goose with the high achievers. I've had high achievers in master's courses who turned around and said, "You've opened up a whole new world I'd never thought of before." The last thing in my world I would turn around after they've seen this Holy Grail is to turn around and go, "Oh yeah, but you've got to do more." There has to be a stage where you're just acknowledging the accomplishment and perhaps saying, and how, the only answer I can come up to my own question is, and how can you apply this in your everyday life? It's sort of a comeback a little bit instead of pushing them further. So my question was, how much of a risk of killing the golden goose with those overachievers?
That's a very good question. I'm not going to say that there is no risk. On the contrary, this is all about managing risks and managing probability. The main essential piece is that we are reasoning with uncertainty. We are not entirely certain that this person is a very high persistency type of student. So you have to manage that risk. Is there a risk? Yes. How do we handle that risk? Carefully writing these things. You as the expert might say, "Ooh, I think the risk of them, seeing the light and dropping the course and changing degrees or changing universities is high, so how can I react to that?" I guess my answer to you would be carefully crafting these emails and making sure you get this feedback continuously, saying, "Okay, what happened with these things?" If one student answers you and says, "What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense to me." Why? Is the data not accurate enough? Did I write something that was not appropriate? That's the way I would suggest it. In your everyday to day operations, my main strong suggestion is talk to TIU, talk to the other academics that are using it. Anthea, what's the last name? Fudge, and Steve Kelly are working with OnTask. That person that intervened before, you're working with OnTask as well. A few of academics here are working on that. The best way is to get a sense of that context, get a sense of those techniques, and then, very important, transfer it to your course.
Okay. You touched on risk. That was interesting. What about, I've seen the message. First time it was interesting. Saw it again. Okay. Not so interesting. Third time, I don't even bother with it.
Yep.
Okay, so at what point is there a saturation effect and people just switch off and don't care?
Okay. Let me be a bit provocative here. If I have a student that is willing to become a nurse and is taking 4 courses this semester, and each course sends 1 email a week, I think they can cope with 4 emails a week about something they're investing 100% of their time. If they're full-time students, it is about you making sure attain the right skills and a degree to become a nurse. If I need 4 emails every week, can you take it? Can you take 4 emails every week? I think they can. Will they pay attention to it? Probably not. Will I change my strategy? Probably not, because you never know. That student may ignore week 4, 5, and 6, but then come back and say, "Oh, wow, 7 and 8. Yeah, look at it." It's their choice, and that's sacred, and that's okay. Another thing we tend to do as academics is we get obsessed with that 1 or 2 cases that they don't pay attention and read any of my emails. I know, but you have 300 students. And I had this conversation time and time again, and it goes like this: "Yeah, but most of the students," and I said, "Yeah, but you have others that, yeah, but what about if the ones don't pay attention is 60%? You still have 40%. Stick with it. It's your job. Just come to terms with that. Maybe that 40% fluctuates. People have lives, right? They may have been going through a rough patch, they don't read your emails, but then they read it back. What difference does it make? I mean, you still have to do your job. You still have to be there and support them. You have to be the coach. It's a bit cruel, it is. That's part of the game.
Oh, hang on. Hello, Lisa. Yeah.
Microphone rules.
Yeah, microphone rules. Just in response to that, I did some work with Anthea Fudge last year, and she actually stopped the emails, and when she stopped the emails, the students missed them. They actually asked for them, so she restarted them. So it was in answer to that, some might turn off, but most asked for them.
Okay, let me wrap up. What typically happens here is, you've seen those four texts, right? The typical mistake we make is, oh, it's week 2, we've covered part of it, I'm going to make an announcement to the course. And in that announcement, you're going to give it to them. you're going to tell them all these recommendations, and you end up writing this email. And that email is basically all 4 text, cut and paste, all together. You'll put at the top, dear student, followed by week 2 has happened, here are my recommendations. And you work very hard to make sure you don't miss anything. And you can see the eye rolling, huh? First, for the concept of specialization and evolution, come on. 4 paragraphs, are you kidding me? So this is basically to bring to the forefront that we tend to fall back in the comfortable solution. I'll make an announcement that you have to engage with the videos. First, you cannot personalize that announcement. Second, you are polluting the channel. Every message that goes out there that I read and said, that doesn't apply to me, cuts the credibility of the channel by half. You do it 3 times, that's it. I'm out. And it's not the students. Don't blame the students. We all do this. Okay? Unless you all of a sudden see some quirky subject line that says urgent or things are burning. And then you're like, oh, yep, I should read this. Okay? So this is basically to bring to the forefront that generic announcements are okay. But again, it's a tool that you have to carefully use. And if what you're trying to achieve is give these specific coaching lines, then I invite you to take a look at that personalization and the use of OnTask. I'll get the microphone.
We were just saying exactly the opposite of what you've just said, which is right, in that those messages that you're sending to the students they feel as if they're personalised, because I think often students feel so alone in this whole entity of learning and education in universities. It's like someone's actually noticed what I've done, and you've actually responded to me in connection to what you've seen I have done or I haven't done. And so there's that sense of being part of something, building that rapport, that relationship, because it's often what's missing, and they just feel part of the great unwashed. So I think coming back to having something like that, you're right, they'll switch off, but if they've got the small individualised one, it's the way to go.
Yeah. The other question I get all the time is like, oh, so what you're doing is you're sending automatic messages to your students. Not quite. I'm using a tool to send them automatically, but every single sentence is there is written by an expert after carefully considering your learning environment as much as we can, right? So it's not that you are receiving a message from a machine. I'm talking to you. Every single sentence is there is carefully thought. There is a lot of hours that person in the biology course, well, I don't know how many, but this is not something you write in 5 minutes. And the students are receiving that text, and it's an expert talking to them. And I agree with you. Sometimes it's a bit, if you ask me, frustrating when they are so surprised that you talk to them, and you're like, no, I shouldn't be surprised, and it should be the rule. There's still some space for improvement. All right, so remember, this would be a case of too much information when you send that long email. Let me wrap it up. A couple of additional ideas we are working, and this is a PhD thesis that is emerging in our lab. We are thinking about, can we gauge different stages of engagement? Can we start picturing or modeling different levels and then talk to the students and say, something at level 1, if you then take some steps, then we'll talk to you at level 2, and follow a formalized approach for the elements of a course. So it's not only about the videos on that biology course, it's this cone of engagement that we imported a little bit from marketing to say, okay, can we support them through these stages? Can we identify these stages? Can we modulate the message based on these stages? And the second one that is very interesting, this is something that is already happening. How come Amazon is making so much money with the click and collect link? Because it's so easy. So easy, right? You're browsing and, oh, I like to do that. And the click is there. And one click does it for you. So we're trying to see if that has any traction in courses. We don't know. The equivalent would be low persistency student, we recommend you do this, this, and that. Big button. Click and do it. Right there. And it bypasses everything. You don't have to ask them again. This is my cheeky way of saying connect to learn online, go to the course, go to the module, go to the week, go to the assessment, go to the view, and then finally click. No. Anyone in Amazon would go like, what? No. Again, don't misunderstand me that I'm trying to sell something to the student. It's the psychological underpinning, which is we want them to make a decision. We have to lower that threshold to make a decision. The click and collect is basically blowing up that threshold and say, you are one click away to have that drone shipped to your house, right? So you go and click. In the course, we still need the expert. What would be the single action you would like this student to take? How can we frame it so that it's very easy? And then detect engagement and perhaps send the next one. That's what we are exploring. All right, that's it. Here are the conclusions. TIU will be delighted if you approach them and tell them, I am dying to use OnTask. First, because you will join the set of people that are already making the most out of it, and second, because they'll provide you very good support to make sure you get something useful out of your course. Move from making information available to personalized information. The next time you hear yourself saying, I'm going to create this and make it available to the students, to think twice and say, how can I make it available in a different way? I am a big believer in this coach mentality. Thinking as a coach puts me in touch with this decision-making process for the student. It applies to any context, so it helps me frame my mind around the right way to talk to students, the right way to address the issues, the right way to motivate them. And like I said, Tia, you will be willing to probably regret this and come back to me and say, what? But yeah, they'll be happy to help you. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abelardo. I'm afraid we don't have any time for questions, but we did have a few questions during the session, so I hope you got to say what was on your mind.